What's the most you've seen someone change from high school to your class reunion? Was laying tile at a guy's house who I went to school with but was a year under me. His brother was in my older brother's grade. His older brother was the biggest drug guy I knew. He did any kind of drug he could since about 6th grade. He never graduated. His younger brother did and was not into drugs. I asked him what his older brother was doing now and he told me he owned his own insurance company. Could not believe it. A few years later I hear the younger brother had been left by his wife and he chased her down at a drive-thru and shot at her car and she sped away, causing him to run after her, shooting. He was eventually killed by the police. Better trademark this story before a movie executive reads it. One guy, legitimate child prodigy genius type, in a super competitive STEM program. As in, most of us are in 11th grade doing calculus and he's about 12. Having skipped a grade or two and then is sitting in on a higher grade just for math class. His parents had a professor from a major university tutoring him after school, pushing him to do math competitions, the whole 9 yards. I don't think he got much of a say in it. It was what they'd been having him do since the age of 3 or so. His senior year, he'd had enough. He dropped out of the STEM magnet program and switched to the creative and performing arts magnet program. His physique was very much a computer programmer's more than a dancer, and he had zero experience with song and dance. He graduates, goes to a small private West Coast school instead of Harvard Yale like his parents had planned, majors in musical theater. After a year or two, that changes to journalism. Takes a leave of absence from school 2 years in to convert to Mormonism. Did I mention his parents were hardcore atheists? Even though Mormons don't make converts do mission trips, he did a mission trip to India for longer than the usual mission. The last I'd heard from him, he was married and having lots of LDS kids somewhere on the West Coast. He's a fantastic guy, but if you'd asked me in 11th grade where I thought he'd end up, it would not have been anywhere close to failed musical theater major and Mormon missionary. This is a process known as the reverse Reddit. Super smart guy at my HS got into M and more and ended up dropping out. He was a total C-kid for several years and then became a born-again cowboy Christian. Goddamned cowboy Christians. Riding my butt in traffic, driving like an aggravated butthole, all the while with their cowboy kneeling to the cross and already forgiven stickers on their jacked up trucks. Yeah, I live in Texas. Not my batchmate but an upperclassman. I used to go to a public high school where everyone was poor or middle class. Absolutely no rich kids. This is in a province in a third world country, so when I say poor, I mean down and out dirt poor. I made friends with this older guy who I always see on my walk to school. When I ask him where he lived he would always point up to the mountain. I always thought of it as a joke, but when he didn't show up for class after a really bad storm, rumors spread that his family's house in the mountains got destroyed. He stopped school after that and I haven't talked to him since. He finished high school the next year and applied to a prestigious university in the country. He took a finance course but had to stop a few times because of financial issues. He graduated 6 years later, with honors nonetheless. Now, he is a regional office manager for a bank and he also owns a small travel agency. The scrawny kid from the mountain became a big-time businessman. I went to school with Jared Fogle, the subway guy. He was definitely not having sex with teenagers when he was in high school. I wonder if prisons will treat his burns from this. There are at least half a dozen people in my class that have killed themselves or overdosed on drugs. TBH, I am amazed everyone in my class of about 350-400 is still alive after almost 3 years. No odds, suicides or accidents yet. A girl I sat next to in homeroom for 11th and 12th grades was always really mousy and quiet. Long brown hair, same jeans and t-shirt every day. At the 5-year reunion, there's this totally hot lady in black, high-heeled boots, dyed blonde hair in a razor cut. It was her. No one could believe it. I was lucky enough to move in the same social circles as she did for a few years and get to know her better. She was always a really cool person, but it was nice to see her come out of her shell. This guy from my graduating year was pretty popular, but a total stoner skater type. 10 years later he's a cancer survivor having undergone several organ transplants, but he's engaged to marry the girl of his dreams and he seems really happy. I hope his health doesn't decline again. Not a reunion, but those don't really happen in the UK, as far as I know. Long story short, a guy got expelled for punching me in the face and breaking my nose. It was just a petty squabble between two teenage boys. I think we were no older than 15 when it happened. Kid crap. Anyway, I since moved away from that town and hadn't seen the guy since. Cut to about 4, maybe 5 years after the incident. I'm visiting back home and decide to go out with some of my friends from high school. We're in the smoking area of a bar when the guy who broke my nose recognizes one of my friends. They start talking without him noticing I'm there. Eventually he notices me. There's a long pause. Feels like forever, but it's probably only a second or two. Is he going to hit me? Is he going to be angry? I go with my gut. I'm somewhat of a pacifist, so I extend my arms to go in for a hug. He does the same. Somewhat of a beautiful moment. He apologized. We both agreed it was dumb crap. We were kids. People grow up. He then proceeded to buy drinks for me and my guys the rest of the night. All in all, for a night's worth of Grey Goose vodka, I'd take another punch to the face. Would have been a funnier story if you got drunk on his free drinks and punched him in the face and then broke his nose. Classic deadbeat tormentor, not a care in the world, blew off classes, barely graduated, antagonized everyone and was a bit of a bully, had gotten married, had 3 kids, established a stable career, bought a house, and was 100% striving to be a solid human being. One of the most awesome moments of that reunion was realizing that 180-degree turnaround. Honestly, most people were mostly the same, just nicer and more mature. Also, some people got fat, but that's to be expected. This has been my experience. Someone brought ashes of a classmate. So from a living, breathing human to a pile of ashes, probably the biggest change I've seen. This one girl was super smart, in all the advanced placement classes, was on school council and all the smart kid clubs, always picked for any special outings like campus visits and symposiums. She came from a pretty well-off family, successful parents and all. I went back home to visit my parents and she's working at the local subway with track marks on her arms. I really didn't expect that from her. There was a similar girl from my high school, so smart, so hardworking, so kind. Her pursuit of perfect grades sent her to the psych ward. She told her story to the class before graduation. Hot girl was co-valedictorian. Still pretty hot, but now sells health shakes or some crap on Facebook. Very annoying. Also, one of the guys who was a little weird and dumb to begin with got arrested for involvement in a child sex trafficking ring. I deleted all the people on my Facebook selling isogenics, Roden and Fields, Nerium and any other sort of that crap. Said I felt old in a status, as a joke, and 10 minutes later I had emails telling me I needed to buy this wrinkle cream. Say I felt fat and I would get a long email about isogenics. Once I politely respond that I'm not interested and they don't stop, I just deleted them. Not a class reunion, we don't have them, but there was a girl in my class who was really quiet, shy, always dressed super conservatively, never came close to breaking the rules, a bit of a Hermione type. I bumped into her, having not seen her for like 7 years, and she was totally different, covered in tattoos and piercings and dreadlocks. Almost didn't recognize her. My old friend in high school was a white girl who would dye her bright blonde hair black so she could try and pass for Mexican. She wore dark purple lipstick and lots of black eyeliner. She sometimes stole her mom's gun to carry around. I know. She dressed like a chola and only dated Mexican gangster guys. Fast forward 10 plus years later and she stopped dyeing her hair and let it grow out to her waist. She doesn't wear makeup anymore, wears nerdy glasses, dresses like a hippie with long flowing skirts and beaded jewelry. She's very mystical and earthy, and only dates hipster guys with beards. She's also a school teacher. She came this close to having a shootout with a girl in high school, but you'd never believe it if you saw her because of how sweet, hippie, angelic she looks now. What a transformation. ETA. She came from a very abused background and I think the gangster persona was to protect herself. The hippie person she is now is probably closer to her real personality because she was a good person inside. Just angry, confused, and hurting very badly. I'm actually quite glad for the emo thing. Kids got depressed and the horror. listened to rock music and ranted about how awful their lives were. It's a lot better than nearly getting shot. One of my friends from high school has never showed up at the reunion. He was on the FBI 10 most wanted list for years. I've got a story of a guy who managed to frick everything up far before a class reunion. This dude was student council president of our school's chapter of a national business club association, homecoming and prom king, great at sports and an all-around star student and popular guy, had a lot of the school's teachers, administration, and students wrapped around his finger. Couple years later gets pulled off a plane the second he got back from his university study abroad program, and was arrested for the violent rape of multiple students at his home university. Don't know if he just snapped one day, or was really good at hiding how disgusting of a human being he was all along. He's in jail now. Good riddance. My high school boyfriend was the captain of the soccer team, held the record for the 2-mile run, was on student council and was voted best character. He dropped out of 3 different colleges, law school, and the ESL program and career he was trying to teach. He's also done time in prison for sexual assault against a minor. I will always wonder what happened. Peaked in high school. There was this one guy who was a little awkward to say the least. Short, creepy, not the brightest academically, and was often the butt of every joke. Well, it turns out straight after high school, he borrowed a large sum of money from his grandpa and started a construction company. Company took off, and he is now living a very comfortable and flashy lifestyle. A small loan of $1 million. The wimpy, nerdy kid who was top of our class but was a scrawny weakling ended up getting into bodybuilding in college and became a rather famous gay P-star in the 1990s. Wasn't a reunion, but a guy I went to school with was always popular. The girls always liked him. He was super smart, funny, athletic. He was a golden child. I on the other hand was very nerdy, though I blossomed in college. After college a few years later I went to a party back home. I ran into this guy at it and it was great seeing him. The first thing he said was, "I don't know why I'm here. This party is too cool for me." I was aghast. The smoothest, coolest, most confident guy I had ever met was now this self-doubting timid guy. We talked for a while and I think he secretly was super nerdy and shy, but back then he forced himself to fake it. In college it seemed he finally was okay with just being himself. We started talking about old classmates and he said one of the nicest things I ever heard. He told me he didn't really keep up with anyone, but I was one of only a handful of people he was ever interested in running into over the years. He's still a great guy and he's one of the most intelligent people you will ever meet, and I got to say, he may not be cool anymore but he's awesome in my book. Not from my class, just turned 22, but my father said that one guy from his, and I'm quoting, gang, changed to a completely different species. He was the wild guy from his group, always getting into trouble and somehow never got caught. He even made one street vendor pass for his dad so he could avoid a beating with the principal. But at the class reunion he was the straight guy, not a hair out of place. He joined the police department. He is a district general, 2 kids both in military school. Whole new guy. My mom was a wild child who took 5 years to graduate high school. 14 years later her HS principal had become the superintendent and started working with her because she became the president of the entire city's PTA and on the council at the state level. He was blown away by how competent and awesome she was. Sat next to this super hot blonde at my 15-year reunion. She said it was nice to see me again. I asked if maybe she was married to or was dating an old classmate of mine, but no. She said she sat next to me all throughout grade 11. The catch? I went to an all-boys private school. That was a plot twist worthy of being remembered. This actually happened recently. Went to school with a very athletic guy, lots of scholarship opportunities. Went to school, then dropped out, got to rape charges against him, then killed a girl and fled to a different state. It's a really sad situation. Guy in my class was the epitome of a math nerd with Coke bottle glasses. Now he runs his own stats firm and is a successful male model on the side. From alive to dead. We were 2 months away from our 10-year reunion and the only reason why I was going was to see my childhood best friend. Instead I went to her funeral. I don't think I can ever attend a high school reunion now. I would like to think that I can, but to be honest she was one of the only people that I liked. We had known each other since age 3, so losing her was like losing a sister. It just isn't the same. In high school this kid was the typical super athlete, alpha male who had a mean streak but always seemed to direct it towards the openly gay students. Who came back to our 10-year reunion and was about as gay as could be. When I was talking to him he came out after we graduated and he started college where he met his husband. He actually went as far as to apologize to everyone he bullied. He was homophobic but now he's just homo. I stayed in my hometown till I was 24. 6 years ago and 4 years since I visited, so most of the changes I've seen have been through Facebook. The biggest change would be in a girl, let's call her Sarah, who I'd been friends with since we were 9. She was always odd but that eccentricity turned into full-on madness. She got heavily into drugs and by 16 she got into sex work and a whole array of other horrors. Anyhow, around 22 she had a kid and totally turned her life around. Before I moved I bumped into her and we hung out a few times. One night we got drunk at our local and I told her how proud I was of her and I said, I can't even imagine what you went through. And she grabbed my hand and the pain in her eyes was like shards of glass into my heart. She just said you have no idea. No idea. And that was enough to indicate the level of trauma she experienced. She's 30 now and is still eccentric as heck but is a devoted mum and a successful local photographer and special event planner. Major kudos to her. This made me smile. You go, Sarah. Keep kicking butt out there. Was sort of friends with this skinny kid and all he did was skateboard and smoke the devil's lettuce every day. Seen him a few years later and he's covered in muscle and in the army. Surprisingly common. Wild girl in college, big drinker, lived with an older married man then dumped him and then became very involved in ministry. I love that band. One girl, kind of plain looking, gangly, once set the football field on fire during a baton twirling halftime show. Always teased. After high school, her father sold his business, a chain of grocery stores most Americans would recognize. Got millions. 10 years reunion. She is unrecognizable. 100k in plastic surgery. Married a rich executive at her father's new company. Absolutely gorgeous. I mean Playboy bunny gorgeous and sweet as can be. Unbelievably happy. I went to school with a guy from a very wealthy family. As in, his parents once bought $2.10m houses next to one another, just so they could knock them down and build a much larger house across the 2 blocks. This guy was more or less the epitome of never has to work a day in his life. Average grades in average classes. Not particularly into sports. Not at all nerdy but not a jock. Just a guy who hung out with all the right people. Threw some epic parties. But was not really outstanding in any way other than he was loaded. He was a nice guy most of the time. With no particular inclination to anything and no indication of what would come. If anything, everything about him at school screamed the opposite of what happened. He and I shared a few classes together over an 8-year period, and I saw nothing which would indicate he was destined for anything but a standard rich kid life. He kind of dropped off the face of the earth after school and rocked up to our 10-year reunion looking completely different. He was taller and much bigger, as in stronger, and really fit. It turns out that he had left high school and earned a degree in strategic studies while training to be an officer in the SAS. He was in the army, in the SAS, for 8 years and received some pretty serious decorations before leaving to head back to school and start a business. He now has a few master's degrees in a few different fields, everything from computer science to history. Nearly 10 years on from that and he's sold the cybersecurity firm he founded post-SAS for tens of millions of dollars and has returned to government service as a senior diplomat and foreign policy advisor, all without touching a cent of his parents' millions. I would never have picked it. I'd have assumed his path would be something like a boring commerce law degree and a career in the family business conglomerate, which he'd eventually take over. Fast cars and loose women. I mean, there's still hope for him yet. That dude is Ozymandias. A girl I went to school with was always picked on because her parents were poor. Her mother worked in a minimum wage job and her dad didn't work at all. TBH, I don't know how people even noticed her enough to bully her as she was always quiet and came in and out of class unnoticed. At school she always, I hate to say this, took the bullying and never once ever complained. That's the best way I can describe it. I remember her as always of average looks and intelligence while we were at school and very skinny. Once we left school everybody went their separate ways. Last year she surfaced on Facebook with a family and also a degree from Cambridge University. It turns out she had joined the army and went through officer training at Sandhurst and is a captain in the Army Air Corps. She has pictures of her tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. The quiet girl who got bullied was a very intelligent tough person, who I suppose we all wanted to be ourselves. It was nice to see. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thanks for the gold, kind strangers. Short stereotypical Indian kid from our junior AP Calc class stereotypically goes on to becoming a portfolio manager of an investment fund. Dude literally pulls up in an Audi R8 and becomes the life of the party. He used to get bullied and made fun of in school for being short and Indian, I guess. High school was fricked up, man. If I could go back in time, I would have stood up for the guy. He always seemed like a genuine straightforward guy to me. Never talked with spite, anger or resentment. Teenagers are cruel. Guess he showed them up in the end. High school was fricked up, man, pretty much. I look back on my own HS experiences as well as everyone in this thread and that's definitely the sentiment. Our class prom king and quarterback ended up being a drag queen in New Orleans. He and his husband showed up at the 10-year reunion. Okay, this is my favorite. The two mean, cruel and nasty girls have both found happiness and are now good friends. I'm even ashamed to describe their former selves. That's how lovely each of them has become and how much I love them. Life is freaking weird. The dorky redhead girl that nobody was interested in got smoking hot. Married to a dorky guy who just walks around with a permanent grin. This is an eerily close description of my girlfriend and I. The smartest girl in my high school class earned a scholarship to a highly prestigious women's college in New England. She lasted 1 year. Said her fellow students treated her badly because she was black and from a working class family. She then tried a year at an historically black college but the classes weren't challenging. I tried to talk her into attending the state university, but then lost track of her. Turns out that she never finished college, met and married a man who's a minister, and ended up living in a small town in a rural area of a southern US state. Had 10 kids and now sells herbal supplements and shakes to make ends meet while her husband preaches. My graduating class, early 1980s, also had 2 people go through gender reassignment. One was a young man who from a young age wore as feminine clothes as he thought he could get away with. It wasn't a surprise that he transitioned. The other person was a young woman who transitioned to male. No hints whatsoever. Best wishes to them both. I hope they find peace and happiness. Unpopular opinion. She may have fared much better had she attended a co-ed school. Full disclosure, I'm male. Attended a rich kids college on a huge grant. Us poor kids there banded together like family. But it was noticeable that some of the working class guys managed to befriend some of the rich guys. I knew exactly 0 working class girls who managed anything but scorn from the rich girls. Girl in my graduating class was destined to be the first female president. Very smart, head of the debate club, artistically talented, charismatic, etc. She dropped out of college and is now a stay-at-home wife. Oh, and her husband is her best friend's divorced dad. Her husband is her best friend's divorced dad. I've seen that pee. I went to high school with this one girl who died 2 years later after graduating and they never found her body. So yeah, that's a huge change. Not someone else, but this is my story. I was a burnout stoner in high school. Played in a metal punk band. Skipped school to get high and skate all day. Cheated my way through most of my classes, except art and history which I enjoyed. Graduated dang near the bottom of my class. Got married way too early. Too ready for a few years making a living as a musician. Living the dream. Went bankrupt. Got divorced for being a lousy husband and a cheater. Spent a few years working for Walmart with my face down in a pile of C. Lost my house and destroyed my credit. Moved in with mom. Met an awesome girl. With kids. Spent a few years toiling away at jobs I hated. Straightened my butt out and finally got real with the fact I'm headed nowhere. Went to school to become an EMT and spent some time volunteering to try to give back to my community. Was encouraged to continue my EMS education and became a paramedic. Started working full-time in EMS about 4 years ago. I'm now in the process of finishing my degree to become an educator and hopefully teach others what I have learned and share my story. I'm in the process of building my first home on a 10-acre lot, where I intend on growing Christmas trees and harvesting fresh honey, with proceeds from the sales going toward local children's homes and veteran advocacy groups. Celebrating 12 years of solid and happy marriage, which at times has its ups and downs. But who doesn't? My oldest is graduating college next year. My middle daughter finishes college the year after that. And my youngest just received an academic scholarship to college. I currently have job offers from 3 other EMS agencies with great prospects, and I just received my first official save pin for a patient I resuscitated a month ago, which I was also interviewed for on a local news station for due to the circumstances surrounding the call. I am going to be moving my mother in with me once my new home is built so I can take care of her. She has significant health problems, and it makes me feel proud that I can give back to her. My father and I have finally begun to patch our rocky past, and I am finally in a position where I can encourage my wife to go to school to pursue her academic goals. If you would have told me 25 years ago that this is where I would be in life at age 41, I would have told you, Jay, you were out of your mind. Life can change for the best. It just takes one good decision a day to make it happen. Don't let the choices you made yesterday determine the ones you make today. I apologize if this comes off as bragging. I am honestly just overwhelmed with gratitude and happiness, and wanted to share. Much love to you. It's nice to see a good story. Congrats and good luck in all your ventures. Your post made me smile. She was the hot one. Always had a boyfriend that was a little older but was the typical hot guy. Senior year she was still the popular one. Pretty much one of the plastics. She won't make it to our reunion in 2020. Found out yesterday that she died from pills and heroin. I guess a couple years after we graduated she started hanging with a new crowd. I'm assuming over a boyfriend. Her best friend from high school told me that she just disappeared for a while and last year she wanted to get in touch. She opened up about her problems, asked for help. Her family wanted her to go to rehab but she refused. She was clean for a while but that changed a couple months ago. It's crazy to think that she got hooked on heroin. Why would she even try it? If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.